Okay guys, got all my panels processed up, brought them out. Everything is exactly at 3/4, the sides and the shelves. Now one of the things that I do is I take my dado blade and I will run a groove in a scrap piece of wood so that when I'm processing my material, I can keep checking it to that groove to make sure it's fitting just like I want. I don't rely on a tape measure because, you know, dado blades can be a little bit, and it doesn't matter whether you're using a dado blade or you're using a router with a 3/4 bit. You know, they can vary just a little bit, particularly if they've been sharpened. And, you know, as long as you've got, in this case, as long as you've got your shelves will fit into that dado, you're okay. Being dead on 3/4 isn't going to be a big issue. As long as they're, whatever you're going to use to cut the grooves, that shelf fits into. Then what I did is I came out here and I took the big size. Now I glued mine all up in one big panel. And so what I did is I rough cut them. I went to my storyboard, and the bottom case is to be, I actually glued these up at 80 inches. The bottom case is to be 36 inches tall. So I'm about 36 3/4 or something like that. And all I did was took a jigsaw and rough cut it, just so I had easier panels to work with. Now, the next thing I did, and again, I glued them up wide. I think we had said 25. I think mine came in about 26 or one almost 27. What I did then was I took and I ran it through the table saw, skimmed one edge, flipped it around, did the other edge on all the panels. Now the reason I did that, if you noticed, when I glued them up, I did not use any caulks or any sticks on the outside to prevent clamp marks. So I wanted to make sure I had them removed. I knew I would be able to do that, so I didn't bother using the caulks to protect it. If you're gluing up tight, in other words, if you're gluing up close, then make sure that you use a caulk. Now the other thing that happens is clamps compress wood. I always glue up wide and come back and trim both sides. That makes sure that I'm dead parallel on both sides. And you're going to understand what I'm talking about. If you've ever checked, you can, if you're indexing off of this one side and you square it, and it's truly square, and yet you come to this side and check it and it's not. That can be because you're not parallel on both sides. So that's something you may want to take a look at. Is doing that, is even as after it's glued up, is do that, you know, hit both edges to make sure that they're just right. Then when I came in, all I've got here is just a straight piece of wood. And I clamped it across the end square. And I was very particular to make sure it was square. Now what I'm going to be using to do this, if you've got a big panel cutter or another means, then that's good, that's fine. What I'm going to be using here is a spiral cut, upcut bit. And I'm going to have to get locked down here a little better than what I am. And all I'm going to do is router cut it. And by that, what I mean is the bearing will run along my straight edge and trim my end. I better be careful here. I got to move this clamp back. Be right back. Now, all right, I see what I did. I had to move that clamp back because my router was going to hit it. Now the other thing I could use on this, going from the opposite direction, would just be a simple pattern maker's bit. And that's where the bearing is on the top, and I would be cutting down. In that case, it would be, the panel would be flipped over and we would be running this direction. And the router would actually be resting against the straight edge. I like the spiral cuts because they give a nice clean cut. And they last really well. They're expensive, but they do a nice job. All right, let's get this thing cut. All right, as you can well see, that cuts a really nice line. But I could still get a little chip out here if I'm not careful. But see, what we're getting ready to do is we're getting ready to start cutting our dados in this. And we're going to cut all those dados with it wide. And in case we get some chip out here. Now the other thing with a corner cabinet, we're going to have to be cutting angles on these. And leaving it a little bit wide, if you happen to mess up and flip instead of flop, well, you got a little bit of extra room there to recover. I never go to my exact width until the last minute. Always keep them wide. Now the objective here is to get everything cut to length. Now that I've cut this one panel, I will use it as my index for everything else, or my pattern. But I want to make sure I'm square. Now what happens if I'm not? I'm dead on the money. But if you would have made a mistake, here's the thing. Let's assume for a minute this isn't square. Okay, because, hey, that happens. What you would be able to do would, because this has got extra length, you would be able to adjust your board and hit it again until you've got one perfectly square edge. That's how you recover from a mistake. When you're building something, just figure on the worst case scenario. Figure it's going to go wrong. And a lot of times it does. Now, what we're going to do is, again, like I said, we're just going to use that pattern for everything else. All I got to do is set my other one up here. Now listen, when you're doing a router cut, don't try to hog it. Don't get crazy. Make sure everything is perfectly lined up. Now there's another point. You know, if you get off a little bit, but you get off equally, you can recover pretty easy. That's not hard. It's when you get everything all crazy. That's hard. Now, it's just do it again. Then, let me run this real quick and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Y'all supposed to tell me when I forget that stuff. Come on, I'm old. Ooh. Man, when I said I rough cut them, I wasn't joking. Now, there's a lot of guys out there who are just getting into woodworking. So I want to show you something. Most of your jigsaws are going to have a lever on it. And if you look right here, there's a lot of chip. It'll be all right. It's going to be the bottom, I think. Maybe not, but anyway. This lever changes the pitch. In other words, it takes the saw blade and it pushes it out or back in. And what that does is that will cause it to cut very aggressive, which will give you some chip out, but just for roughing out, it's fine. It's faster. Middle, not so much. And when you come to the back, brings the blade straighter so you don't get, or back a little bit so you don't get that, quite all that rough cut. That's what that lever's about. All right, we got one, that end square. Now what I got to do is simply measure this 36 inches and rough cut it again. Then I'm going to line it up, and I'm going to cut my top and my bottom using the same panel. So I don't have to keep putting that, see what I'm doing? All I'm doing is mirror imaging this whole thing. See how close I am here. I done lost the tape measure again. There it is. All right, I'm about 36 3/4 here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this off at about 36 3/16 or something like that with the jigsaw, and then we'll come back and route it. Okay guys, I'm all cut and square. Now, we're going to start laying out for our dados. Now on our storyboard here, this is the bottom case we're working on. We've got a 4.5 inch base. We've got a 1 inch space. And we're not worried about the door yet. Then up here, when we get up here, then we leave a space for our door, our space, drawer, space, and the top. So we got to lay all that out. Now I'm going to explain this as I go. But let's start with the base. I got a 4.5 inch base and a 1 inch space. That's 5.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure up 5.5 inches. See, I told you I had one of them flat tapes. Just had to go find it. So I'm going to measure up 5.5 inches. Now here's something I like to do. When we close our door on the bottom, I want to have a door closure. I want something stopping the door. So I want the floor to actually come up above that 1 inch space. About 1/4 inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come up to 5 3/4. Then I'm going to measure from that point back 3/4. That will be the floor. Now I'm going to note that on my storyboard while I'm here. Shelf 1/4 above space for door closure. All right, now I'm going to lay that out. Now I'm going to mark it out here on the edge because that's where I'm going to be working to get it. And I'm going to make it really nice and dark. So I'm going to use my little gel, black gel pen. They don't make as fine a line as I like, but as you can see, boy, they make a nice. Now, but I have to maintain, I can't get confused here, and that's easy to do, because this is actually going to be the bottom. This is going to be the bottom of the case opening. And my pencil broke. I don't want to write with this pen. Let me get a pencil. Here we go. Still want to have a compass. All right. Now, from our 1 inch space opening to the bottom of the next space opening, did I write the total door height on here? I did not. All right, let me see what I got here. I'm 23 3/4. Is that right? Let me double check this. It looks like 23 7/8. $23 3/4. That's going to work. Total door. 23 3/4. All right. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go from what will be the bottom of my case up 23 3/4. Now, I'm going to do the exact same thing, except I'm going to do it in reverse. My case top. Case top, bottom, spacer. Now I'm going to back down 1/4 inch, I mean 1/4 inch. Go up 3/4. That's where I'm going to put my my dado. Again, I'm going to create a bottom closure. Now, if you're really following close, you're probably wondering how I'm going to guide the drawer. Because the drawer, something for the drawer to run on is going to have to sit at the top of this opening when we get into our drawer opening. And I'll show you how we do that when we get there. Don't want to confuse you here. Now, what you have, just to make sure you understand this, what's going to happen is that when we get our face frame on here, this shelf and this bottom is actually going to hang down past it on the top a quarter and be up above the bottom a quarter. So that when we close our door has something to go against. Now, the top up here, all I got to do here is simply make a flush 3/4 inch for the top to go in. Not difficult. But I'm going to note this on my all right, so I'm going to be a quarter below space for door closure. All right, now right now we're just dealing with this bottom case. We'll get to the top case in a minute. So I'm ready to go cut some dados because I want to get some cutting done in this. All right, so I got to put a dado right here on this top. I'll work it out. All right, let's go cut some dados, guys. That'll do. Think. Yep. Now again, you have to stay oriented here because I'm indexing in this case to do this center one. I'm indexing off the bottom because even though the shelf is in the center of the opening, it's not in the center of the panel. So it does make a difference from which end you're oriented. And in that case, I'm going from the bottom. What happens if you cut a dado in the wrong place? Well, the fact that you're going to be painting this, you just kind of take your little body filler or something and fill it and maybe say some things that aren't real nice and get on with the program. But let's assume for a minute you put a dado in the wrong place and you're not painting it. Then what do you do? Well, you know, to put a big old gob of filler down through there would just look awful. These little end cuts you took off, don't throw them away real fast. Because what you can do is trim this down to 3/4 wide, turn it on its side and cut you a little piece out of it, matching your grain the best you can, and glue it in place. Because the grain on it's going to be running vertical, just as the grain in the panel is. It's probably not going to be invisible, all right? But whoever sees it from 100 years from now is going to say, look, he made a mistake, and look how good he was. That means it's okay for me to make one. Because it happens to the best of us. Now, I ain't going to tell you how I know about that, okay? But don't throw them away anytime soon. Might need them. All right, we got 2 bottom cases dadoed up. Now we're going to have to come back over here and start laying out for our upper case. So Crystal, if you want to move the camera over, we'll do that. All right, we got to lay out this upper shelf, or the upper case rather. Now we've got, looking back to our storyboard, we've got a 7/8 molding, 1-inch space, and this is our door, glass, mullion. We laid it all out. So what we're going to do is we're going to have that 7/8 molding in our 1-inch space. So it's 1 7/8 inches. But we're going to do the exact same thing on the bottom. This will only be on the bottom. We're going to elevate the shelf a little bit to give us a door closure. Now, in the top of it, where we've got the top going all the way to the top, obviously when we get up here to the top of this door, we're not going to be able to use the shelf as a door closure. So when we build the case, we'll actually come in behind that and put a little piece in there to make one. And it'll be coming down, and it looks nice. But at the moment, so I've got 1 7/8 inches. So I'm going to lay that out. Let me get my trusty lead pencil. All right, I got 1 7/8 inches. Now I'm going to go 1/4 above it. Then I'm going to go, of course, 1/2 below it. I can't even see the thing. All right. So this is going to be my face frame line right here. And this is going to be my dado. All right. 1/4 above face frame for door stop. All right. Now, then I've got my 2 3/4 inches will be my door bottom, 9 1/2 inch glass to the mullion. So 9 1/2, 2 3/4. I know some of y'all out there just rattling these off. Is that 12 1/4? I think so. I'm on the center scale side of that. Yep, looks like 12 1/4 to me. Now be careful when you're laying this out. Don't, make sure you go from the bottom of the face frame and not this dado. All right, 12 1/4. Then we're going to draw in 1 inch. Now, because our face frame, because our shelf is 3/4, there's always a little controversy of whether that mullion, when you put the mullion in the door, whether it should set dead flat at the top of the shelf or whether it should set in the center of the mullion. You can talk to, a whole lot of people, and one says that shelf is supposed to set dead flat at the top of the mullion. The other one says, it can go a little bit below it. We're only talking, 1/8 of an inch, top and bottom. So I'm going to put it in the center. Now the reason I'm going to put it in the center is in the event that there's the least little thing off, it's going to be hidden. So you start to get a lot of lines in here, and you got to stay, okay, this is the dado, and this is a 1-inch mullion. All right, move on. And the reason we want to be careful there is now, we've got a 9.5-inch glass. That's our exposure. So I'm going from here up 9.5. Again, my inch, back down 1/8, up 1/8 to give me my all right. Then we're going a 9.5-inch glass and a 2.25-inch door top. So again, 9.5, 2.25. $11 3/4. See, remember the bottom of the door is 2 3/4. The top of the door is 2 1/4. So that's why you have a difference in the width of this shelf and the upper. Okay, Crystal had a question. And maybe I said something wrong. I'm working on the top case, but I'm working from the bottom of the top case up. Gotcha? This will be our top case. That's the bottom of the top case. All right, 11 3/4. Now this is where my door is going to come in. My door is going to land right there. But see, we don't really want to put a dado in there, and this is what I was explaining. And the reason we don't want to put a dado in there is that we have one right here in the top. So we'll have to put a closure strip on the face frame, on the back side of the face frame. So we don't need it. We've got our top dado. So we only need a top, mullion, and the bottom. Got that? You'll see, it'll all come together for you. Now we're ready to head back to the table saw. Cut these dados.